Welcome one, welcome all. Kevin Reitzman is here in the chat. Hey, no more X-Men. Yes, I did not realize that until pretty late on that the X-Men theme song was the link on the website for this show. So, I mean, if you didn't get a chance to check out the website, just make sure to listen to the X-Men theme song. You know, that means Xander Schauffele is probably going to take the players today. I think he is tied up there for first, but we're not the PGA show. No, we are talking a little bit of NASCAR. And we are at Bristol, and Bristol provided a great race last night between the trucks. And we also get a little bit of fun today between the Cup Series. And I am joined by Stats. Stats, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. I'm actually I'm pulling for Xander myself, so I've got a little bit of a future on that one. So we'll take that.
Oh, 100%. Xander's looking very, very strong. Wyndham Clark duffing his shot on 17 and then recovering like that. The golf streets are a little bit fun. I know that we had a bunch of showdown content for it and everything around it. So here's the hope. And I know that Big T is also sweating out in the 3K entry. So it looks like it could be a good night and a good day for RPS as well. And want to get one thing out there, March Madness. I know everyone has probably been watching a lot of basketball this weekend. And we do have a single sport package for March Madness for the tournament this year. So it is $30 for a week, or if you want to buy the whole tournament, it's $60 overall, and you can use code March15 for 15% off your purchase here for your first purchase there. And just so you guys know, first time single sport for March Madness here. Stats. Let's get on to this Bristol race a little bit, right? I'm going to share my screen. We're going to screen share SaberSim. We're going to go by with the drivers by about. Let's see. By about price. Let's do price today because I know starting position is one of the kings of Bristol. Real quick, before we get into the SaberSim screen share, what is this Bristol layout? How do you approach this slate, and what can we expect today?
Yeah, so we've got a half-mile track. I mean, this is the shortest track that they'll run on. I think it's tied with Martinsville. And so we've got short, steep track, but they're using the intermediate package. They're not using the short package this week. So that's something to keep in mind and just maybe look at some of the drivers who have done well with that package. This was a dirt race the last few years, the spring race. We're now back driving on the asphalt. So so if you're going back and kind of looking at history and trying to look at this race last year, you kind of have to throw it out. It was a totally different track, dirt race, I believe the last 3 years. So you have to throw out the spring race for 3 years at Bristol. So just look at the fall race for some history at the track. So what you're looking at historically here, another one of these short tracks. The way it works with the short tracks is dominator points, right? So we've got 500 laps here. There's going to be a ton of dom points to be had, and that's going to be the focus. That's where a lot of the ownership is going to be on the guys up front who have a chance to dominate this race. So I think we're looking, when you're building your lineups, you're going to want to have at least 2 doms. That's historically how this race is going to go. Sometimes you're going to get 3. So you're going to probably want 2 to 3 doms if you're doing mass multi entering on any of like 150 lineups or something like that. So and of course, if you're single entry, at least 2. Now the guys who start in the back, the cheap scrubs typically don't really come in. Why? We talked about it last week. Same type of deal. They're going to get lapped, so they're going to not have the ability, even if there is some carnage, they won't have the ability to move up because they're going to be 2, 3, 4 laps back, and they won't have the chance to really give us any points. Now, the guys in the back who will are some of your better drivers. So if you've got the top tier drivers, which we've got a few guys this week who are more like mid-tier who are in the back, those guys historically have done well from the back of the pack in this at this track. So I think what we're looking at is a combination of, we'll probably have a few guys starting up at the front. And if you don't mind, I actually did just a little bit of research just to show you just kind of the guys. When we've had years where there've been some decent guys in the back of the race. So 2023, Larson started 36th, and then he was coupled with 3 guys who started in the top 8. Okay. In the nuts. In 2020, Bell started 35th. He was in the optimal. He was paired with 3 guys starting in the top 10. Busch in 2019 started 31st. He was with 4 guys who started in the top 7. And if you go all the way back to 2018, Harvick started 39th, and he was with 3 guys who started all in the top like 5, I believe it was. So you're going to have guys. You're going to have the guys up front at least 2, maybe 3 guys in the top 10 because of the fact that it's so hard to pass, and we're going to get the dom points are going to come from the front of the pack. So look for that, coupled with maybe some cheap guys who are a little deeper. The range that's kind of not as far as starting position that hasn't done well here is that mid-teen range. So that's the area that historically doesn't do well because those drivers don't have as much opportunity to really dominate, and then their place differential isn't good enough. So that's kind of the weak point here. So we're looking sort of for guys starting up at the front and the back, I think, in the 20s down to 36, and then the guys up front.
Yeah, it's well put. We have a few drivers in the back that we're going to get to later on, specifically Chris Buescher and Ross Chastain. Chastain was very quick in practice. Buescher has won here before here in the fall race, and that's in the next gen package too. Like that's in the next gen car. So it is important to kind of look at the last 2 years specifically for this data, right? We don't have it for the dirt track, right? When it was in the spring, but we do have a couple races in the fall to fall back on a little bit here. And Buescher is a guy who, starting 34th will be one of those guys that you mentioned, where you pair him with, a few guys in the top 10 and kind of approach the slate that way, because there's a very real chance that Buescher could drive it up to the front at some point. Larson in that race where he started 36, wasn't last year, right? He ended up leading 20 laps, which, at that point, it's just gravy when you have someone driving from the back there and leading some laps. But one thing to also note, over the last 2 races here is that, what was it? 100 laps or led or more by 6 drivers. So 3 drivers in each race led over 100 laps. Now that screams a lot. That screams almost optimal if you lead 100 laps. And that is something that we are going to want to target. And that's why it's important to have 2 DOMs. And where are the DOMs most likely to come from stats? It's from this 10K range and up. So look at the odds. They're also available on the playbook and beyond. Your 3 favorites or 4 favorites are Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, and Christopher Bell. And those are the 4 guys who I look at, and I want at least one of those in any lineup I play. I want at least one of Blaney, Bell, Hamlin, and Larson. And yes, they are the most expensive guys on the slate, but that's how I'm approaching the stats. And I wonder if you're approaching this range in the same way, because Byron almost becomes the man who kind of gets left behind in this group at 10-7. I'm not sure how I feel completely about HMS, but he will be a little bit of a pivot off, more ownership, more ownership where probably falls on Hamlin, probably falls on Blaney. Blaney's going to be one of the highest owned guys. And then you have Kyle Busch in this range too. So talk to me stats. What do you think about this range, and what are you planning to do with this 10K and up range?
Yeah, so the 10K and up, interesting. Obviously, we'll start off with Larson. Let's actually start with the guy who I think is going to be the highest owned, which is Blaney. Starts first. Here's the thing. We talked about it at this track. If you get out front and you dominate a bunch of, he could dominate the entire first stage. 125 laps going to be in the first stage. Who's he going up against in the second position is Josh Berry. So the chances are really high. He takes the lead and doesn't really give it up for much of stage 1. So after that, it's going to be really tough to beat him. If he dominates much or most of stage 1, it's going to be really tough to not have Blaney in there. Now, he's in there with the Penske. We don't like, if you look at the odds, like Penske's not, I believe Penske might be, or the Fords, or Penske team. I got to look at, the Penske team of the top teams does have the highest odds there. So we're looking at JGR is the favorite. Penske is the 4th choice. So they're not expecting a win, but he could certainly dominate this race early and be a factor. So it's going to be really tough to punt Blaney. I actually like him. He's going to be one of the higher owned guys, and I do like him as a core play just because of the fact of who he's starting next to in this race in Berry. So I just don't think Berry's going to be able to overtake him. That's the thing. We'll get to Berry obviously later on as he's much cheaper, but you can almost punt Berry there and just figure Blaney's going to lead a lot of these laps. Now, if we look, Larson, Larson's probably the best driver in this race. You look at the history. I mean, he's got a 2nd last year, 5th in 22, and a 1st in 21. He's going to be a factor. The starting position of 10th, you don't mind that. He's going to be able to, at some point in this race, I do think he dominates. So again, we're looking at a lot of salary here already. So if you get a Blaney and a Larson in there, PJ mentioned in the chat, he's right. The guys 6,300 or less, but we're going to have some guys in that range that I think are going to be really good plays. So we will most likely have some high price guys, and then the mid tier is going to be a little weaker. So I think we could easily see a Larson and a Blaney get to the front. But then you take a guy like Denny Hamlin, who won this race last year. He's at 11-2. I mean, you're probably not going to be able to get all three of these guys in the winning lineup. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But Hamlin's going to take a lot of the ownership as well. I mean, he was 8th in Vegas, but first in Bristol last year, had a 2nd at Richmond, 5th in Dover. Those are some of the short tracks out there. So Hamlin, obviously a great play on short tracks. I expect him to get in there and dominate as well. So we've got some really good options up at the top. And then you look at Christopher Bell, who was 33rd in Vegas. But if you look at this track, he had a 3rd and 23, 20 in 22. He was 4th. Christopher Bell, I think, has had a little bit of bad luck this year, may get overlooked a little bit. So I think, I mean, he's going to have high ownership, but I think some people may get off him and look to some of these other top guys. But Bell, again, starting 12th, you may not see it in stage 1, but he could dominate as well. So I think we've got some really good options. I think my least favorite here is going to be Byron starting 8th. I think he just starts a little too high. Just haven't seen enough from Byron. I don't think he dominates in this race, which he's going to have to do starting at 8th. So I think I like a lot of these options up at the top, as I think most of the market will. The other guy up over 10K is Kyle Busch, who I do not like whatsoever. I think Busch is going to be slow starting 14th. I don't think he dominates. I don't think he contends in this one. And we watched him in the trucks. Totally different story with the trucks, but he was 15K last night in the trucks, and I was a total fade on Kyle Busch, which worked out just fine, even though he finished okay. But he was going to have to dominate that whole race and win it just to be in the winner, and he wasn't. I don't think we see Kyle Busch really contend here today. So I'm actually fine with a total punt or a total fade of Kyle Busch on this one. So a lot of guys I like. I don't like Byron, don't like Busch.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to like anyone in this range, and I'm with you. Busch and Byron are the guys who, you kind of just got to pick your poison, right? Like at the end of the day, who's more likely to lead a ton of laps? And those are the two guys that you pick up, saying, I don't really want those two. And the other 4 can absolutely kill me if you fade, or you can absolutely propel you to the top. And what PJ kind of mentioned too is that, like, these shitters can, or the scrubs, I should say, can absolutely get there if these guys lead. And when I looked at it, I don't think I have like an overly high projection, a guy like Kaz Grala, but if Kaz Grala got 30th, moved up 3 spots or whatever, there's a chance that Hamlin and Blaney are paired together in the winner. And if it takes, 2 guys dominating the whole race, which is absolutely possible here. I mean, we saw, like I said, past 2 races here in the fall, there has been 3 drivers in each race to lead over 100 laps. You definitely want that upside. And if you're punting, 9 points in that 5K range to get an extra 30 in the top tier, you can absolutely do that. I'm not sitting here going to say Kaz Grala is a great play, but if it gets you what you want, to fit in Larson, Hamlin, Bell, and Blaney, if it fit 2 of those guys, then I'm for it. And I think you summed it up perfectly. I don't think I need to just keep on going. I mean, if I had to rank them, I think for me, it's Blaney, then it is Hamlin, and then it's Bell, Larson. So I do like Bell a little bit. Larson's obviously got a little bit better odds than him, but that 500 will make a difference. And Blaney being the cheapest of the bunch, you mentioned it against Josh Berry. Josh Berry wasn't like fast in practice or anything like that. It would be an upset if Josh Berry dominated any part of this race, but especially in the beginning. And what they were talking about, putting that fresh resin down onto the track, like, this has a potential to just be like 1 lane for the first start of the race at the very least, right? So Blaney could easily just lead this whole first stage, right?
Did they say they were going to put new resin down?
Yes, they did. They did this morning. Cleaned up the track and put down fresh resin.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because if you saw the practice, it was a shit show. So there was a big split between the A group and the B group in the practice. And I thought they might not do that. And I haven't looked at it. So really you have to kind of toss out the practice. If you look at the guys who everyone pretty much, I believe it was in Group A, just their practice times were way better than Group B. So now if they're going to throw that resin down and these guys are running slower because the practice was kind of slow, it may be really tough to pass. They might not even try. They were having a hard time sticking to the track. So if that's the case, yeah, we could get a lot of laps led by just one guy here in the on the first stage, especially until they kind of wear it off a little bit.
Yeah, and you said it best. Until they wear it off a little bit, right? That first stage can absolutely belong to Blaney, and then it kind of becomes a little bit different afterwards. And I mean, that's kind of the best thing about it. And BG3, you mentioned Hamlin was slow in practice. Does that worry you? Not with Hamlin. Hamlin is always slow in practice almost. So he is one of those guys where I throw out the practice data for, come race day, he's going to have a fast car. He's going to be able to at least contend. And Hamlin's one of the few guys that I just throw out his practice data entirely unless he's fast. If he's slow, I put it the sandbag and, trying out new things and stuff.
Yeah, and again, he was in the B group as well, and they were all slow. So you kind of have to toss it out.
All right, perfect. So one of Chastain or Buescher will be on. Which one is it, Braden? I decided to include Chastain in this group. So we're going to do 8.5K and 10K in this range because Chastain and Buescher is a very good talking point here. The resin does wear off a little bit, so Lane should be able to move around after the first stage. Correct. After the first stage, and that's why Blaney it probably is the safest in terms of one of these DOMs because of that first stage. So stats. Let's get into this range here. You mentioned the back of the pack can be very successful here when it's good cars starting in the back. And we've had good cars starting in the back. Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson in recent years. Like, these two guys are starting in the back here, Ross Chastain and Chris Buescher, and then to a lesser extent, Tyler Reddick. Then you have your teens that you were talking about. Like, you don't really love the teen starting position here, and that's Keselowski. Truex, you can kind of throw in that same mix. And then Logano is another potential Dom who I'm personally off of, but I really want your take on Chastain and Buescher. Chastain, very quick in practice. Obviously I had a little bit to do with group you were in and stuff too, but definitely has a car that can absolutely, it wouldn't surprise anyone if he got a top 10. Buescher, on the other hand, I think Buescher is a far better play because of the fact that he's won here before. That he can absolutely dominate this track because he's done it here before too. Not that Chastain's a bad driver or anything like that. I just have more confidence in Buescher here. The one issue with Buescher is he's 9.8. So it's a very expensive tag stats. And when you're weighing it, right, you got the floor in Buescher, one of the best floor plays in the slate, great for single entry, great for cash games, great for everything. Does he give you enough upside at 9.8? And that's a big question I want to see if you can decipher.
Yeah, well, I hope I can, but I agree with you here where I like Buescher a little bit more than Chastain. Cash games, they're just kind of a must play, right? So if you're playing cash, make sure you play those guys. Very little downside. I can make the case for fading both of these guys in GPPs. I mean, if you're mass multi entering, obviously you're going to have a piece of them, but if you're playing a single entry, I could definitely make the case to punt these guys or fade these guys and then go with the more some of the guys who are going to dominate, because quite frankly, now Buescher's been great at Bristol in the next gen car, but he's not going to be able to dominate any laps here, I wouldn't think, starting 34th. So I'm not expecting that. He should be fast, should get a pretty decent finish, but is it enough at 9,800 when we've got other guys here? If we get dominated, if we get the guys in that last group that we talked about, you get two of those guys in there, it's going to be real tough to fit in a Buescher into that group as well. Or, now we're getting a little bit of a price savings going down to Chastain at 8,500. He starts dead last, so we get two better spots there. I don't think he's as fast necessarily as Buescher is, but I could totally see neither one of these guys, and they're going to be fairly high owned because of where they start. And obviously, I don't want to totally fade these guys, but I think if you stay in the market or slightly under, I'm okay with that on both of those guys. The other guys in this range that I don't particularly like, don't like Reddick. Don't like Reddick at all over here. He's kind of struggled at Bristol. I think a guy who's interesting, who maybe coming in a little bit lower owned, is Keselowski. I mean, he starts at the 17th spot. It's kind of in that range that we don't love. 9,200. It's another. Again, we're looking at this 9K price range that we generally want to get some. We want to get some dominator points out of here, and I don't think Keselowski does it. But Buescher's getting a lot of attention, and Keselowski, his teammate, is pretty much just as fast. So I mean, there's potential there where Keselowski can get us a really good finish at a low ownership. Just not a play I love. I think Logano, I'm going to be a little bit over the market only because the market is so low, but I don't particularly love Logano. If I was single entry, I wouldn't even be thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, and then Truex is another guy I don't love. Starting way too high for me at 11th, just hasn't performed well at this track. If you're looking to, maybe get a low ownership type of guy and that you want to throw in potentially, I just don't see it with Truex. He's going to have to get up there and get you some Dom points. And I just don't see that happening with MTJ. So I think in this group, the most interesting guys, and we're adding, of course, Chastain into the group, but Buescher and Chastain. But I can make a case that none of these guys really make it into the winning lineup. And Chastain and Buescher, of course, will be the highest owned.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it too. Chastain is 8,500. The 1,300 drop off from Buescher and stuff. And we're going to push a little update through after the show with the projections. So I do think Buescher should be a little bit higher, but I think they have the same odds to win in that starting position and all that. And I think the practice feed's got a little bit of the best of me on Chastain. But you look at it, 8,500 can definitely be good enough. But Buescher, 9,800, if he didn't lead laps, might not be good enough. And PJ makes a great point. He scored, 84 points last year, Gibbs that is, and wasn't optimal. You can absolutely put up a good score and not be optimal here. However, it is the floor, it is the safety net of it. If you can tell me that, Buescher would get 65, would you take it? And I don't think I would. I don't think I would take 65 from Buescher. So that's a big question, especially in large field tournaments. I think in single entries that if you're building around and you're like, you know what, like I can't get up to one of those four guys that I mentioned earlier, Bell, Hamlin, Larson, Blaney. You should have one of those at least, in my opinion. But I will look at it this way, where I don't mind Buescher as a piece right after that. Maybe you can settle in on and be okay with. But that's why Chastain's going to pop a little bit more, though. You're going to get much more Chastain, or you're going to gravitate more towards Chastain because he's 1,300 cheaper. He is in a range that honestly is pretty weak. Like if I, scroll down out of here, right? The next cars are Chase Elliott, Ty Gibbs, Bubba Wallace, Alex Bowman. So you look at this range here. If you were to include the 7,500 and up range, Ross Chastain is quite by far one of the best here. So Chastain's going to be extremely popular for that reason. I think he's a good play in either format. However, just be sure that you're not just limiting your upside because we still want to get those Dom points. It's not all about floor here. We definitely still want to get that upside. You mentioned it, driving from the back and stuff. I think I would be much more comfortable with 60 from Chastain than 65 from Buescher. So I think that's the way to put it there. Let's see here. Josh D keeps sleeping on Logano. He hasn't made us pay yet. I mean, I'm okay with it at this point. I will say this about Logano. Actually, I don't think we slept on him last week. I think, he ended up crashing out. But he keeps qualifying pretty high. So, I mean, like last week, I think I was on him here. How do you fade drivers like Buescher and Chastain at 20 max? Not play them at all? Because even playing them at 25% seems like a waste. This is from Christopher Q. Stats, what do you think about this question?
Yeah, I think if you're going to fade them, you just do a total fade there, right? I think we've got options. We're going to get to it. We've got some cheap options where we could get we could stack in some of these high price guys who should dominate this race and be able to eliminate those guys. And so if it works out the way we think, we could totally fade those guys. Listen, when you play 20 max, when you play any of these, quite frankly, you've got to be willing to totally punt your 20 lineup. Like you've got to be willing. It's all or nothing. You're trying to win these things. You're not trying to cash. So if you're trying to win, you've got to make bold. Sometimes you have to make a bold stance and take a hard line stance against or for some of these drivers. And to me, this is an opportunity where you potentially could do that. So if you're not going to be, now I'm high on them, and it's not like I'm not high on these guys in my 150, but if you're of the if you do want to fade them in a 20 max, I think you just go with a total fade.
So it is a very interesting thing there because, obviously if you faded, Buescher and Chastain, what you're doing is you're probably lowering your floor in terms of what you can return. However, your upside is a little bit greater. Like you're not entering a 20 max to double your money, right? You're entering that 20 max to maybe get first and stuff. So I think it's like having that mindset of, I'm probably lowering the floor of what my return is, but the upside is definitely much greater. I think I would fade them in a $4 20 max like today. I think I would punt those two and Hope to get those studs like we talked about earlier, just for that top prize equity. And single entries, I think it's a little bit of a different discussion, if you can lock in that floor. But at the same time, I do think in that 20 max, it's definitely fine. Fade Reddick, BG3. So Reddick, you talked about his stats. You said he struggled here. And, honestly, he has. He has very much struggled here. He's got a quick car. Problem is, he's 9K. He doesn't provide the PED of Chastain. He doesn't provide the PED of Chris Buescher. He's sandwiched right in between them. He doesn't dominate. It's the same thing. You're losing. What is 13 points to Chastain. You're losing 11 points to Buescher. I am a little bit lower on Reddick as well, so I'm kind of with you here. Don't sleep on Chase. He loves concrete. We're going to go ahead and get into that conversation about Chase, but first I want to talk about Stephen Ferrer. Chastain could get lapped. Let's talk about that real fast stats. Chastain starting in the back of the pack. He's going to have a very fast Blaney chasing him down. How would you approach that, Chastain? Because we didn't really mention it, because there's a legit chance he gets lapped in the first stint.
Yeah, getting lapped at this track is likely. I mean, I forget what percentage of the field, but it's well over 50% of the field, I believe, won't finish on the lead lap. But I mean, there's that possibility, of course. But I don't believe I think he's going to be able to move up enough where he's not going to that he'll be on that lead lap after stage one. But the possibility is certainly there, and that adds to the fact that you may want to fade a Chastain. I just think he'll be good enough to move up, but for sure that possibility is there. And if he gets too far behind, he's not going to be a factor at all. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly a possibility and adds to the fading proposition.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of an interesting thing, without a doubt there. So, I mean, I think it's worth the conversation, right? Because if he does get lapped, like that completely kind of morphs his upside a little bit. I still think he's got good upside, right? But if you get lapped in that first stint, and then, you got to be able to be the lucky dog, and to get the free pass and stuff like that afterwards. And what it does, it can limit him from potentially getting into the top 10 or maybe even much more. And what it also does too, and this is what you kind of mentioned earlier, the upside in terms of dominating the race is almost gone at that point. Let's see here. Chase Elliott, Ty Gibbs, Bubba Wallace, and Alex Bowman. So I made my feelings very, very clear on Chase Elliott last week and Alex Bowman. So Alex Bowman, sure enough, 7,500, starting 29th. It's going to be, I think this is just a scheduled part of the show where I just bash Bowman at 29th and say, until he proves me wrong, I just continue to fade. But he is getting into that range where he's almost cheap enough to where if you did tell me you got 15, there's a decent chance he could be in the winner. But I also want to mention, give my Chase thought. I think the best driver in this range to pick from is Ty Gibbs. And that's not really saying a ton, but Ty Gibbs, dominated here last year. I think he led over 100 laps. And honestly, like the town, like the car, 8K is not a bad price at all. If someone did end up leading a few laps from this group, a lot of people would say Chase Elliott. I would prefer to take Ty Gibbs straight up. So stats, Chase Elliott starting 5th. Are you tempted to dance with the devil again at 8,300?
I'm extremely tempted, man. I'm jumping in. I'm overweight. So I think I want those guys up front, and I think with his history here, even last year when he wasn't good, he was still pretty good at this track. Where did he? I think he had so he finished 7th last year here, and second back in 22. I'm gonna fall for it again. We said it. I think we said last week, all right, we're done. We're done. So I jumped off him. I jumped off them for 1 week. I'm coming right back. He could easily dominate this race. So I'm going to be overweight. If he dominates this race, I should have a really good day. So yeah, I'm overweight on Chase. I like it a lot, but I agree with you also. I think I don't know if he's next best or he's better. He might be better than and that's Ty Gibbs in this range. So there's two guys I do like in the range. I mean, Ty Gibbs starting 19th, 8K. I mean, does he get up there and dominate? I don't know. But he could have a really strong finish, and at that price, if he does win, I mean, he's got an outside shot, I think, to win the race. I love the equipment with the JGR. I mean, they're the favorites to win this race. So Ty Gibbs, I don't think you want to be underweight on either one of these guys in this race. 19th, I'm okay with it at that price. for AK. I think Gibbs has a shot to win the race as well. I think both of these guys have a chance to win the race.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think Ty Gibbs, obviously we know the talent and stuff, and what he did last year is very, very promising too. Like in that fall race, it's good enough. And if you were to tell me you get 84 today at 8,000, I would 100% take that. I mean, the issue just comes down to Chase. Like I need to get over that mental block. I already swore off of him. But 8,300. So this is why it's important, right? If you got a dominator in the 8K range, they are likely, or I wouldn't even say likely, they are almost a lock unless they crash to be optimal. And Chase Elliott, you know what? Odds agree. I mean, they've always agreed with Chase Elliott, but you want that upside, and he's got a great chance to do it. He's got the best odds in this range to win. I think all right. If he fails me this week, stats, because I'll say it again next week, probably do. But if Chase Elliott fails me this week, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm in the 30s. I'm like 35% on him, so we'll see.
And that's extremely high, all right? Because I think 20%, is why I got him 22. So I mean that's like you want to go overweight on these guys because if they end up winning, or end up leading any laps, likely optimal. I'm throwing out Bubba. I didn't hear you give your take on Alex Bowman.
Basically, I'm going to agree with you. I mean, you said you kind of toss Bubba. I don't like Bubba at all, and I don't like Bowman, even though starting 29th, cheap 7,500, but I just can't see he's just not going to do enough here, not going to dominate, and I don't think he really gets up there close enough to the top where it becomes where the place differential becomes enough. So I don't like either one of those guys. To me, it's Chase and Ty in the range that we're looking at right now that I like quite a bit.
Yeah, Sato, I will say I will hop on Chase at the road course. I will do that, even though I want to say it was last year where he just ran out of fuel or something like that. Last year, it was a good team too. I think Chase Elliott just ran out of fuel midway through. And yes, Alex Bowman's one of those guys where he'll never not pop. Starting 29th, but end of the day, does he provide you enough upside to win? Cash games, good. Tournaments, I'm staying away. I'm staying far away. I wouldn't even play him in single entries and stuff like that. And that's just because I'm just done with it. I don't want mediocre. I want someone who can win, or I want someone who can really move up and threaten for a top 10. Alex Bowman just hasn't shown me that yet. And that might be a little bit harsh. I understand, but it is what it is at this point. Let's move on to the next range down. So the wheelman, Chase Briscoe, a guy who actually has a lot of talent and stuff. He managed the qualifying conditions just fine yesterday. He starts 6th. You also have Eric Jones starting 15th. You have Daniel Suarez 28th. Michael McDowell was pretty quick in practice and qualifying, starting 7th. And then you have Noah Gragson with back-to-back great finishes. Ricky Stenhouse starting 27th. And then probably the fate of the day, Josh Berry. So stats, you look at this range. I think we want to dig in a little bit deeper. We want to wait until the next range to really dive in on a lot of these guys. But I will say it is a little bit tempting for guys like Daniel Suarez. I think Chase Briscoe could pull off a decent result at 7,300. It might be a little bit of a high tag. And then Noah Gragson's form is tempting as well. So in this range here, probably not a whole lot to choose from. Who are your favorites?
Yeah, so I mean, I went. I think you've got them at 8. You have Briscoe at 18%, and I'm in that ballpark as well. Just because, I'm totally fine if you want to fade a guy starting 6th here. If you don't think he's going to dominate for mass multi-entering, though, I'm just going to take my shot that if he does break out here and lead a bunch of laps, it's going to be good enough at 7,300. He starts close enough to the top. Anything's possible. He could get there for me. So I was kind of toying with the fact of just totally fading him, but I left him in there. And when I'm running it now, I'm going to be, in that kind of 15% range thereabouts. And so if you're going to do that, you kind of need, you want these guys who are starting up at the front, who at least do have a chance to lead some laps, because they could totally break the slate if they do. And you're going to need that guy. Now, the other guy in this range who's starting right next to him there, or I guess right behind him, would be McDowell. And that McDowell, I just don't like at all. So I think that's an easy, you could kind of totally fade McDowell. Now, when you look, you mentioned Suarez. To me, he's similar to Bowman. I think slightly lower ownership. They're starting, pretty comparably 28th. only 7,000. I'm just going to bring up his history here. I don't think it's, 11th in Vegas, but nothing really impressive at this track. 21st, 19, 22, 26, 18, no great real, you have to go all the way back to 2019 where he had a couple of top 10 finishes. I just don't see it as well. So I'm totally cool. I think he's going to be a little higher owned than he should be. And I'm cool with the total fade as well on Suarez. So yeah, this is just not a range. It's typically not a range that does really well. And there's not a lot of guys in here that I like. Now, Eric Jones, perhaps some low ownership. Maybe we get, let me just look at what his, because I believe he had some, if you go back a few years, Eric Jones has some top 10s, top 5s, actually, if you go back to 2019 and 2020. But again, kind of starting in that 15th range, 15th starting spot, that's a range that has not done well. If you look historically, I could bring up, I've got like where these guys historically, where the top 6 basically have finished in fantasy points. And when you get to that 11 to 15 range, that's the weakest part until you get to the bottom, especially when there's scrubs at the bottom as far as scoring, just because you don't move up that much. So it's really tough to score from that mid-range starting position. So yeah, just not thrilled with much of the guys here. I'm just kind of field. I'm looking at my list that I put up here on RPS. Other than McDowell in this range, I'm pretty much just going to be on the field or slightly under on all of these guys.
Yeah, makes sense. And I really want your take on Josh Berry. So,
did we get down to Berry? I'm sorry. Yeah, we didn't get. I forgot we were getting down all the way to Berry.
So I just want to phrase it like this: his projection might be a little bit mean. I got him at 7. It's far more likely he finishes 25th than he does 15th even. And that's where you start getting way back there. Just the score becomes really suffered. And look, he did a great job in qualifying. I actually think he gets a little bit of ownership, probably around 7 to 10%. I think he's the worst play of the season. But I'm curious because am I being too harsh here, Stats?
No, he's going to have to, it's going to take something crazy for him to get out front. He's going to have to get out in front of Blaney. And sure, if he does that and leads you a bunch of laps, he's going to be in there. I think it's way more likely that he goes to the back pretty quickly, never becomes a factor, and you don't need him. There's going to be other guys there's some guys that we're going to get to who are a little bit cheaper, who I think have a lot more upside and a lot better chance to get into the winning lineup than a Berry. So absolutely, he was a total fade for me.
Yeah, okay, good. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I'm not being just super mean to Josh Berry in that situation. Let's go ahead and move down to our next tier. So we're going to go ahead and do it with the rest of the drivers. And it might just be a little bit extended on this because of the fact that, there's going to be quite a few drivers. And I think that construction-wise, it's very important to talk about why some of these guys might hit your team, specifically with Kaz Gralla and stuff. As I realized, I didn't actually include Kaz Gralla. So I look at this range here, Stats, and we had 2 guys who are very fast in practice. We had Allmendinger and Nemechek, right? That could have been aided by the groups they were in. You know a little bit more about that. You have Austin Dillon, who's in a very good piece of equipment, starting 31st and can actually drive us into the top 20. He's done it before here at Bristol. Ryan Preece, who you like on short circuits, and what has he got? 12th here last year, I believe. So he had a very strong finish here. It might have been 14th. And then kind of moving down, Carson Hocevar for Legacy last year, putting up an 11th place finish here at Bristol. We know the talent he's got. I like everything about Carson Hocevar. At 5,800 as well, he might be one of the most popular players in the entire slate. And then you start getting into your throw-ins a little bit. Maybe Gilliland, McDowell is a pretty fast car. Gilliland might be able to. Then you have Kaz Gralla hitting for me because, well, he's cheap and he allows me to fit all these studs. So go through this range. I want you to pick your 5 favorite and then talk about your 5 favorite and who. And then I want you to give me your take on that 5K range as well, because of the fact that how much of Kaz Gralla should you be getting, right? Or how much Kaz Gralla is he viable in a single entry lineup and stuff like that?
Yeah, so one of my favorite plays on the whole slate is going to be Hosever, starting 35th. He's going to be pretty chalky. I think he's going to be high owned. What did you have him at on ownership?
I have him at
You got him low.
I got him at 14. That probably needs to be upped.
Yeah, I think he's going to be high. I think he's going to be in the high 20s.
So you think he gets steamed up? Like what we saw with Austin Cindric last week was what 36% or something like that. It was absurdly high. And Hocevar, I think I had in the high teens or low 20s. Actually, no, I did have 30 on it. So I do think Hocevar definitely comes in probably in the mid 20s, more likely now that after everything's been settled. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, I know you like him. And he's going to be high owned for me as well. So I don't think we're going to be the only ones here. So I think he does get up there. It might even get into the 30s. Obviously going to be a chalky play. It's going to be a good cash play for sure. I think that's an easy one to take. But I think when I look down at this sub 6K range, and we've talked about it, where we're going to have to get some cheap plays in. This is a guy who, of all of these guys, I think has the potential to get up into the low teens. He's I think easily top 15 type of potential. Just going back, let me look at his so what was he, 11th in Bristol last year, 15th in Vegas. So yeah, I mean, if we could get that kind of performance at that price, I think he winds up in the optimal with some of the guys up at the top who are going to probably dominate this race. So I definitely like Hocever. Another guy I like just above him at 5,900 is Priest, who I don't think is going to get nearly as much ownership. Of course, his starting position is not as good. He's going to be starting 25th, but Priest pretty good at this track, really cheap. I think you want to be overweight on Priest. Let's look at I don't remember what you had on him. So you have him pretty low as well. I think he's going to be a little bit higher than that. I think he's a guy who's going to be in the teens, and I would want to be well over on Priest. Let me just bring up his history here. So, I mean, he's got a 12th, 17th, 9th back in 2020 and a 12th. I mean, he's had really good performances here considering where he's starting and what the price is. So that's just another guy that I really like for in this sub 6K range is Ryan Priest. And so let me look at some of the other guys. Did we talk about? We didn't go into Austin Dillon, right? We didn't get into.
Yeah, you can absolutely go into Austin Dillon.
So we got.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Austin Dillon's another guy with a high floor. You got he starts 31st, 6,300 is the price. Another guy who I think has a good chance of finishing in the teens, in that 10 to 15 range, which could be good enough. Had a decent run in Vegas. He was what was he? Vegas, he finished 16th. He had a 9th at Richmond in his last race. So, in his recent history here, it's been kind of up and down, but he's had plenty of finishes, even a top 10 finish back in 2020. And he's had plenty of finishes in that mid-teen range. So I think that's another guy that we could look at, Austin Dillon, who's going to get some ownership. I don't know where you have him at. I would think he's going to be, you've got him at 11. I think he even gets higher on than that. I just think the guys here at the bottom are just going to, their ownership's going to get bumped up a bit just because we're going to be so heavy on these high price guys. And I think people are going to look away from some of these other really cheap guys, these 5K guys. I just don't like a lot of them. I know you said you were getting a lot of Kaz Gralla. I'm kind of punting a lot of these cheaper plays that I don't think have a chance to get to stay up on the lead laps. I just think we have enough guys like Hocever and Priest, I think, are cheap enough that we can get that I could save enough with those guys. We'll see. I'm just going to be so overweight on those guys that I'm hoping that certainly that they come in and it's not a total punt like where you just take the 5K on Kaz Gralla, and because we have just so much salary that we had to spend up top with all the Dom points. So I'm just kind of banking on that and hope that's why I am so overweight on the Priest, Hocever type of guys down at this price, because I'm really not taking the other guys. I don't think I took anyone from Zane Smith down. So, and even Todd Gillen, I'm trying to see. Zane Smith down basically. And I actually took a bunch of Todd Gillen. It's not a bunch relative to the fact of his ownership, just because, again, I don't have a lot of guys in that range. So Gillen right now in my lineups wound up being in the high teens, which I think you've got him at what, 10%?
And I could see that steam kind of coming in on certain guys, right? Like at the same time, like I didn't expect Cindric to be the third highest or second highest owned driver on the entire slate last week. And that could absolutely be the case with a guy like Hosvar, who I think definitely deserves a bump. The counterpoint to Priest is I don't think he gets steamed up a ton starting 25th. Like I can definitely see, I think I'll stand pat on that one, right? But Austin Dillon, Carson Hosvar, guys who are starting in that 30s and back range, right? I think you're absolutely right. They probably do get a little bit of movement. Priest probably does come in a little bit higher than Nemechek too. And we got why so much Nemechek from Braden here. Nemechek was very quick in practice. You know, he's been good here before too, like not in the Cup Series or anything, but you have a little bit of talent. As I lagged out there for a second, we're back.
I didn't know if it was you or me. I was like, oh man.
I was wondering the same thing when I saw the screen share gone. I was really worried it was me. But yes, like talking about Nemechek and Allmendinger, like I'm a little bit higher on them than most probably. But at the same time, like the speed in practice, groups aside, you know, still at least shows me a little bit of something. And I don't mind taking a gamble on that. And one thing that I really did like to have there was I lowered Casgralla, Justin Haley, Harrison Burton, everyone basically Zane Smith and below. So I wanted to see something stats. And I did get a Casgralla lineup, and I got him projected for 12, which absolutely reasonable. I think that, you know, if he got 12, you'd be happy with it. Why would you play Casgralla start getting 12 points? Well, this is the exact reason why. It would fit in, you know, one of the best PD plays in the slate, Carson Hosvar, Blaney, Hamlin, and then it has Reddick in that mix. So the argument would be, well, I think any combo of those 6K guys and, you know, whoever you can get aside from Reddick is probably better than Reddick and Casgralla. But that's kind of the situation, right? If you're punting a driver here at 5K, you better be sure those 5 other drivers are really solid. And that's the thing. I don't mind punting it completely. I think my best lineup yesterday's stats had a 12 piece from Spencer Boyd, which completely different series and stuff like that. But punted the spot, it got Eckes, and, you know, obviously it didn't have Busch and Eckes because that was basically impossible. But that is certainly possible here today to get 2 dominators in that sense. So yes,
I think that lineup that you showed is kind of the way you'd have to do it, right?
Yes.
Because let's figure out like how's the race going to play out for that to happen, and it's really going to have to be 2 of the highest priced guys are going to have to dominate, and if that's the case, that means nobody else dominates, which means you're going to have to play them with place differential. So if you're just manually playing this, this is the type of lineup that it's going to have to look like, because to get 3 of the guys to get 3 dominators in there at the high price where they get enough laps to dominate is probably less likely. I kind of like, if you're using Casgralla, I like how this one looks, getting 2 guys from the back. Getting the 3 guys from the back, really, we're looking for more place differential with 2 guys starting up front who can really dominate and take most of those points for lead laps. So I like the way that one is constructed. So if you are going to go that route and you're doing it with a single entry, 3 max, something like that, I would look at it more that way, right? Because you're going to have to get place differential guys in there, because we're going to get the high price guys. You're banking on those high price guys eating up most of the dom points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way to do it. You know, if we did get 2 drivers who led, you know, 60% of the race, right? You would be minted in that scenario if it was Blaney and Hamlin. So yeah, I think that sums it up well. Favorite driver below 6.2K. For me, it's Hocevar. For you, is it Priest or Hocevar or Dillon?
Yeah, it's gonna be Hocevar. Yeah, for sure.
Uncle T in the chat. What's up, Uncle T? Hope everything is well with you. And, you know, we got a little bit of time on our hands. So please like and subscribe. So if you like the video at all, hit the like button here. Helps us out a lot. And also subscribe. One last promo here, and then we'll get into our drivers of the day. And then also our bets. You know, I wonder if you've placed any bets yet. I haven't checked yet. But real quick.
Not yet.
Oh, perfect. All right. So then we can debut it here. So it'll be perfect. March 15 is the new code here. 15% off your first payment here at Run Pure Sports. We are debuting a single sport package for March Madness only. So if you are interested in college hoops and want the best content in the industry from our guy Steve Boyden, we also got Kurt, we also got Captain doing projections. It's got playbooks, shows, core plays, and much more here for our March Madness package. And that is, again, March 15, 15% off your first purchase, and you can get it for the weekend or you can get it for the entire tournament. But want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And yeah, I already said like and subscribe. So stats, let's go through some of your favorite bets so far. I know you haven't placed any, but maybe where your eyes are tempted right now and who's looking the most likely to win this one.
So yeah, if we're looking at the favorites, and again, this is one of those races. I don't know if we get that great a price. I mean, you get decent prices every week, right? Because it's so hard to pick a winner. But I think we're probably looking at one of these top drivers as far as the odds go winning it. So of the top four guys, I mean, Blaney's the favorite with Denny Hamlin and Larson. They're all pretty close. I'd actually move to the fourth guy. I'm going to take a shot, Christopher Bell. You could get him at plus 600 at most books. I think DraftKings FanDuel have him at plus 600 right now. If you're lucky enough to have Bet Rivers, you can get plus 650. But so I like that. He's the chalkiest play that I like. And then we'll go to a guy that, the guy that we swore off, I would take a shot maybe at plus 1,200 or even plus 1,300 over on BetMGM with a Chase Elliott. Yeah, you knew where I was going. So, Chase Elliott's the guy. And then if you want to dig really deep, I like Ty Gibbs at plus 22 or plus 2,500. Really, you could get, I believe, at BetMGM. So 2,200 over at DraftKings and FanDuel. Those are kind of three guys that I'm looking at right now. I just think the price, 2,200 is tough to pass up on Gibbs. I like the equipment, so I'm going to probably just dabble a little bit there. So I like those guys. I mean, you talk about the fair. They're just two. To me, Blaney, it's not that I don't like Blaney, Hamlin, or Larson. I think they all three have a really good chance to win the race. I just don't want to pay that much. I think I just like the savings a little bit at plus 600 because I kind of put Bell in with as likely a chance as those other guys to win. So I'll take the price. Again, when you sports bet, and we've got sports betting over at RPS, it's about value. You're not trying to pick winners in anything, really. You're just trying to pick what you think is going to happen more often than the market thinks it's going to happen. So, and so that's why I kind of like Bell a little bit more than I like the other guys. Not that I don't think Larson, Hamlin, or Blaney are going to contend to win. So that's my choices for the bets.
So, fun fact on Christopher Bell, I believe he has led, 330 laps, so 33% of the laps here at Bristol in the last 2 years. So that is on the fall race as well. So that's just the concrete. So it's very, very good. Starting 12th, I'm absolutely in agreement there. I think Bell could be one of those guys where, he's also projected to come in lower than Larson, Hamlin, and Blaney too. So I love that for tournaments. I love that for everything, including the bet side. Let's get into our DFS driver of the day. The rule I will set is we can't say Carson Hocevar because he'll fall into this criteria. But he's got to be lower than 20%. Or 21%. I'll allow you to say Chase Elliott or Ty Gibbs. So I'll have you go first here, but under 21%, a guy who might be a low-owned dart who can be in the optimal today.
Well, I had another one, right, last week.
Yeah, that's right.
In the optimal, right? I had Ty Gibbs last week, right?
Yeah, crushed. He crushed.
So we've gotten like 2 out of the last 3 in with these low owned guys. I'm going to go with Priest, low owned. He qualifies here, right? So,
yes, absolutely qualifies.
Yeah, so I'm going to take Priest as my low-owned play of the day and see if we could stay hot with these plays. Our cores have been really good, and these play of the days have been really good. So those guys watching the show, I know a lot of people in the chat have been crushing it. They've been just kind of playing the cores and then mixing in their own plays in there and been doing really well. So hopefully we'll keep that streak going. I've got my cores up already. I think you started on it. I think you got your cores going in the on the website as well. So
yeah, started by putting the core tag on Carson Hocevar. So that'll be the one piece of the core today. But yes, I love it. Ryan Priest. I'm also going to stick down low. So if you've watched the show, you start from the beginning, you very much know my feelings for the top of the pack. To get that top of the pack, you need to dive into these value ranges. And I'm, again, going strictly for the optimal winner. I want someone who's going to be able to drive up the back, potentially get me 30 fantasy points. And that guy is AJ Allmendinger. I like Allmendinger quite a bit. I think, he's a veteran. He's got experience enough to where I'd be very, very happy with a 22nd or a 21st and potentially be in that winner at 6.1K. Someone that I will mix in a lot with those stars and scrubs builds. So you got Ryan Priest from Stats. You got AJ Allmendinger from me. Hopefully you guys had a great time watching the show. Again, hit like and subscribe. Don't forget about our March Madness package. And also, we also have a racing only package. So if you like the content today, you want to get a deeper dive into the core plays, playbook, and much more, we got Big T who's on that sheet and everything around it. And also in the chat. You can do the same code, March 15, or even NASCAR 15, 15% off the single sport package for NASCAR alone. It covers everything from F1, trucks, Xfinity, and the Cup Series. So if you're just interested in maybe trying it out this week for Cup, but next week we get a load of series. We get F1 in Australia. We get Xfinity Series back, and we also get Cup. So lots of fun to be had, and good luck this week. And hopefully next time I see y'all brackets are not busted, because we will be in the midst of March Madness there on next Sunday. So again, thanks for watching, and have a great rest of y'all's day, and goodbye.